I'm Claire Bennett, 29, and I'm sitting in a one-bedroom apartment I can finally afford after 3 years of living on rice and borrowed time all so my parents wouldn't lose their home. I used to think being the dependable daughter meant I mattered. But no matter how much I gave, it was always my sister Lily. They celebrated the artist the favorite, the one they thought was saving them. For 3 years, I secretly sent $5,000 a month to cover their bills, skipping meals, selling my car, and working weekends. But when my father stood in front of our entire family and praised Lily for my sacrifice, mocking the only birthday gift I could afford, I finally broke. I told the truth, out loud, in public. What came next wasn't gratitude, it was denial, backlash, and a silence deeper than I ever imagined. Before I share what finally made them see me, and what I did when they didn't drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. And if you've ever had to fight for your place in your own family, hit like and subscribe. You're not alone. I used to think being the eldest meant being trusted. That if I did everything right, kept my grades up, helped out around the house, stayed out of trouble, my parents would see me. Not just notice me, but really see me. But from as early as I can remember, that was never how it worked in our home in Raleigh, North Carolina. My father Thomas worked in construction, long hours under the sun, always coming home with scraped knuckles and a limp in his step. My mother Margaret was a part-time elementary school teacher. They were good people, hard-working and exhausted by life's demands. And somehow, through all of that fatigue, they always seemed to have an endless well of patience for my younger sister Lily. Lily was the golden child, and everyone knew it, even if no one dared say it aloud. She had that effortless kind of beauty that made strangers smile and teachers linger a little longer when praising her work. Her hair was the color of sunlight, her eyes a bright cerulean blue, and her voice, soft, sweet, always perfectly timed for admiration. Where I was methodical and cautious, Lily was dreamy and magnetic. Everyone seemed drawn to her orbit, neighbors, friends, our parents most of all. Growing up, I was the one who remembered dentist appointments, packed lunches, and field trip forms, not just for me, but often for Lily too. When she lost her ballet slippers the morning of a recital, I skipped breakfast to help her search. When she forgot her science project, I was the one who ran it to school during my own lunch break. No one asked me to do those things. I just did them believing that one day my quiet consistency would matter as much as Lily's glow. Every August, we'd go back to school shopping. Lily would come home with new shoes, notebooks with glittery covers, and a backpack so bright you could spot it from the parking lot. I'd get a single new shirt, always neutral, always practical, and was expected to make do with her hand-me-downs, even if they didn't fit quite right. When Lily wanted to try dance lessons, my parents enrolled her in the best studio in town. They bought her new leotards and attended every recital with cameras in hand. When I asked about joining the academic decathlon, which cost only $25, I was told, "Now's not the time for extras." It didn't take long to realize that in our family, love was not distributed equally. It was weighed against beauty charm and how well you played the part of someone worth investing in. The moment that stayed with me most was the piano conversation. Lily and I both begged for lessons. We'd saved our allowances, even wrote little notes to plead our case. I thought maybe for once we'd be treated the same. Instead, my father looked directly at Lily and said, "Sweetheart, you just have that musical spark. Claire's more of a practical thinker. She'll understand." And I did. Or at least I pretended to. I smiled, congratulated Lily, and sat through her first recital clapping with every other proud parent in the audience. But inside, something began to sink. A quiet ache. A question I never said aloud. What more do I have to do to be chosen? I didn't know it then, but that ache would follow me for years. By the time I entered high school, the differences between how Lily and I were treated were no longer subtle. They were structural, embedded into every choice my parents made. every resource they distributed, and every ounce of attention they gave. Lily became the heart of every family conversation, the name most often on my parents' lips. She had joined the school's drama club, and from the moment she stepped on stage, it was like the world, especially my parents, rearranged itself to spotlight her. Posters of her school plays were pinned to the fridge. Mom rearranged work hours to attend rehearsals. Dad once drove 2 hours just to see her perform in a one-act competition that barely lasted 15 minutes. Meanwhile, I was quietly earning a 4.2 GPA and holding down a part-time job at a grocery store to start saving for college. I came home from shifts with aching feet, my hair smelling like produce and bleach, but never once did I hear, "You're working so hard, we're proud of you." Not because they weren't proud necessarily, but because I don't think it ever occurred to them that my efforts were worth celebrating. The night I was inducted into the National Honor Society, I stood in a borrowed blazer and gave a short speech to a room of beaming parents. Except mine weren't there. Lily had a dress rehearsal, and that took precedence. I clapped politely for my classmates' families and walked home alone that evening, carrying a certificate that would eventually be folded into a drawer no one opened. Then came the scholarship. I'd won $500 for academic excellence, a small sum, but it meant everything to me. I asked if we could go out to dinner to celebrate. Nothing fancy, just a meal together. But that same night, Lily had a date and needed the car, so dinner was postponed. Indefinitely. I told myself it was fine, that I didn't need a dinner or a frame-worthy moment. But part of me couldn't help wondering why Lily's performances warranted fanfare while my milestones passed like whispers in a crowded room. Still, I held on to the belief that maybe, just maybe, things would change once we reached adulthood. I thought that once the glitter of high school wore off, once we entered the real world, my consistency would count for something. That finally my parents would see the years of showing up, not just for myself, but for them, and for Lily, and treat me with the same pride and attention they gave her so freely. That hope carried me through college applications. Lily had her heart set on a prestigious private art college in New York. Tuition, room, board, it totaled nearly $50,000 a year. When she was accepted, it was as though our parents had won the lottery. There were cheers, toasts, and immediate planning sessions. Loans were co-signed without hesitation. My mom took on a second tutoring job just to help with Lily's supplies. Dad called extended family, bragging about her natural gift. I, on the other hand, applied to public state schools. I researched scholarships, filled out FAFSA forms on my own, and worked extra shifts at the grocery store to save whatever I could. When I brought up my financial aid package, my parents smiled with a kind of patronizing pride and said, "We're so proud of how independent you are, Claire. You've always figured things out on your own." That was the message, plain and simple. Lily's future was a family investment. Mine was my personal responsibility. It was both sobering and clarifying. There would be no fairy tale turn, no sudden shift where my family saw me as equally deserving of their time, money, or energy. I wasn't the child they championed, I was the child they relied on not to need championing. But instead of breaking me, that truth hardened something inside me. It made me even more determined to build something that no one could ignore. If love, support, and recognition weren't freely given, then maybe success, real undeniable success, would finally force them to see me. So I packed my bags for college. No send-off party. No "we're going to miss you" tears. Just a quick hug, a checklist for utilities, and a promise to keep them updated. Lily's art supplies were packed in new luggage with matching tags. My dorm essentials were stuffed into secondhand suitcases I'd bought from a yard sale. On the drive to campus, I looked out the window and made myself a silent promise I would work harder than anyone else. I would achieve more than anyone expected. And one day, they would have no choice but to notice. But what I didn't yet understand was that being noticed isn't the same as being loved. And sometimes the harder you try to earn someone's pride, the more invisible you become. By the time college began, Lily and I had diverged into two separate worlds, one carved from privilege, the other shaped by necessity. And while we both technically left the same household, we didn't leave with the same tools. Lily's world was vibrant and curated like one of the art installations she admired. She moved into a private liberal arts college in upstate New York, with a full set of matching luggage dorm essentials, handpicked from high-end catalogs, and a tuition package covered entirely by our parents. They never hesitated. Not once did they ask her to compromise or consider state school. She had a dream, and they adjusted reality to make it fit. Mine was less a dream and more a blueprint. I chose a public university in state. It was affordable relatively, and I could keep my part-time job. I didn't expect help, because by then I understood the unspoken rule Claire will figure it out. And I did. Between student loans, work-study grocery store shifts on weekends, and a patchwork of scholarships, I made it work. Barely. I remember my first week in the dorms walking the long hallway of peeling white paint carrying plastic tubs labeled with my initials in black Sharpie. My roommate's parents were still there helping her decorate hanging string lights, setting up a mini fridge. I unpacked alone. No one sent me with a care package, a dorm warming card, not even a text to check if I'd settled in. I told myself it didn't matter. After all, this was what I'd chosen, independence. But the truth is, no child chooses to go unseen. Lily's updates, on the other hand, became the highlight of every family call. Her new professors, her projects, her incredible sensitivity to color. When she sent home paintings, my parents cleared space in the living room to hang them. When I sent home honor roll updates or job offers, they replied with quick thumbs-up emojis or one-line emails. "That's great, Claire. Keep it up." They didn't mean harm. At least I don't think they did. They just never realized that praise, when unevenly distributed, can feel like silence. And silence over time can feel like rejection. By sophomore year, I was working 30 hours a week while carrying a full class load. I skipped meals, walked to work in the snow to save on bus fare, and bought used textbooks 2 editions out of date. But every time I thought of quitting or taking fewer credits, I pictured the look on my parents' faces when they talked about Lily, the pride in their voices, the way they said her name like it was an achievement, and I'd keep going. My graduation was small, held in the university's field house with rows of folding chairs and a rented cap that left an imprint on my forehead. I paid the graduation fee myself. My parents didn't attend. Lily had an art showcase that same weekend, and they wanted to be there for her. I said it was fine, that they should go. But sitting alone in the bleachers afterward, watching other students hug their families, I couldn't help but feel the weight of all the years I'd been strong without recognition. That was the day I realized something fundamental in my family love was not unconditional. It was curated, selective, often accidental. And if I wanted to matter in the way Lily did, I would have to build something undeniable, something so solid they couldn't help but see me. So I did. I graduated with honors and a degree in marketing. I accepted the first job offer I received, entry-level, modest salary, long hours, but it was a foot in the door. I moved into a studio apartment that barely fit a twin bed, but it was mine. I lived on instant noodles and spreadsheets and ambition. I said yes to every project, stayed late without being asked, and volunteered for roles no one else wanted. Because I wasn't just building a career, I was building evidence that I mattered, that I was worth seeing. But what I didn't know then was that evidence alone wouldn't change what had been silently decided in my family years ago, that Lily was the center and I was the scaffolding. And as I started sending money home quietly, anonymously, instinctively, I didn't yet understand how deep that scaffolding would have to go before it finally cracked. My first apartment after graduation was just east of downtown Raleigh, 400 square feet of chipped linoleum floors, a Murphy bed that creaked when it folded down, and a kitchenette so small I could reach the fridge and the sink at the same time without moving. Rent was $650 a month, which after student loan payments, utilities, and groceries left me with little else. But it was mine, my space, my effort, my proof that I could do it on my own. I remember furnishing that apartment like I was curating a life from leftover secondhand dishes, a wobbly coffee table I built from a kit, a thrifted couch with a tear I patched myself. Every purchase was considered budgeted and often delayed. I'd make a pot of chili that could last 5 nights. I collected coupons like currency. I told myself it was temporary, that this chapter was simply what ambition looked like before it bore fruit. And while I was building something real with grit and sacrifice. Lily moved back home. She returned from her prestigious art college with a degree in fine arts and no plan. Our parents welcomed her back into the house without question, converting her old bedroom into a studio, buying her canvases, brushes, and whatever she said she needed to stay inspired. She painted through the day, scrolled Pinterest through the night, and spoke about creative freedom while Mom clipped coupons at the kitchen table. At family dinners, she'd prop her new artwork on the sideboard like centerpieces, and my parents would gush over her brushwork and sensitivity. She sees the world differently, Mom would say, as if Lily had unlocked a level of existence the rest of us couldn't access. They hung her paintings throughout the house, displayed them for visiting friends like rare heirlooms. When the conversation occasionally turned to me, my marketing campaigns, my small wins at work, it lasted maybe a few minutes before being gently redirected. "That's great, Claire." Dad would say, "You've always been good with numbers." Then back to Lily, her color palettes, her gallery dreams. I never interrupted. I never demanded more. I had trained myself too well to be the one who didn't need praise. It was around this time that I noticed things shifting at home, not emotionally, but financially. Dad's work in construction was becoming more sporadic. His back pain, once a quiet complaint, now required prescription medication and physical therapy. Mom had started tutoring after school hours, sometimes on weekends. I saw the exhaustion settle into their faces like shadows they couldn't shake. One night I overheard Dad on the phone with the electric company asking for an extension. Another time I noticed Mom quietly swapping branded cereal for store-brand knockoffs. They never said anything directly, they didn't ask for help, but the signs were there. So I did what I'd always done, I stepped in quietly. I set up an automatic monthly transfer from my checking account to theirs. It started at $200. Just enough I hoped to ease a bill or buy groceries. I never told them it was from me. I even made sure the transfer label was generic. I didn't want credit. I just didn't want them to struggle. At first they were puzzled. I remember Mom mentioning the deposits at dinner once, laughing nervously. "Must be a glitch," she said. "Or maybe Lily set something up and forgot to tell us." And just like that, Lily became the hero again. They praised her generosity, her quiet maturity. "She's growing into such a compassionate young woman," Dad said one night, "helping us out while still chasing her dream." I smiled, nodded, took another bite of the dinner my money had helped provide. I told myself it didn't matter who got the credit, that the important thing was the help itself. But a part of me, some small, tired part, felt the sting. I had spent years making sacrifices so quietly that even when I gave invisibly. And Lily, she didn't correct them. She never pulled them aside to say, "It wasn't me." She just smiled, let them believe it, and went back to painting. It wasn't jealousy. It was something deeper, more painful. A feeling of being used as a foundation no one ever bothered to name. The structure stood because of me, but no one could see the beams I had laid beneath it. And as I increased my monthly transfer to $400, then $800, then $1,000, that feeling only grew stronger. They were surviving because of me, but they were thanking her. And I had no idea how far I would push myself before I finally broke. By the end of that first year, I was sending $1,000 a month to my parents. It was never discussed, never acknowledged, at least not to me. They continued believing it was Lily. And she, whether out of comfort, cowardice, or calculation, let them. I told myself the arrangement worked, that what mattered most was their stability, not who they thought was providing it. But there's something uniquely painful about watching someone else be praised for your sacrifice, especially when that person is already holding all the light in the room. I remember sitting at a family dinner one evening just before the holidays. The table was warm and loud, the air thick with the smell of roasted vegetables and slow-cooked ham. I had spent the morning clipping coupons to buy groceries for my own fridge, only to hear my father boast about the Christmas ham Lily's contributions had made possible. "We'd be in real trouble if not for our girl," he said, smiling across the table at her. "You've kept this family afloat." I watched her smile. Not overly proud, not smug, just accepting, comfortable in a praise that didn't belong to her. She said nothing, didn't correct him, didn't glance at me. And that more than anything was what broke something inside me. Because up until that point, I had clung to the idea that Lily didn't know, that maybe she assumed our parents knew the truth, and the silence was just miscommunication, not a lie. But that dinner proved otherwise. She knew exactly what she was doing, and I was complicit. Still, I said nothing. I kept showing up. I kept working overtime. I kept eating dollar store ramen and skipping outings with coworkers so I could free up more funds each month. Because that's what I'd always done, carry the load quietly. The only person who seemed to notice something wasn't right was Ethan. We'd met at a coffee shop near my office. He was a software engineer, soft-spoken, attentive with a way of listening that felt like safety. In the beginning, I tried to keep things light, but Ethan saw through people the way most people saw through windows. He noticed the exhaustion behind my polite smile, the way I always offered to split the bill even when he insisted, the way I'd flinch whenever he asked about my family. One night, after attending one of our family dinners with me, he waited until we were back in my apartment, me curled up on my torn couch, him on the floor beside me with his back against the wall. "I don't mean to overstep," he said gently, "but do they always treat you like that? Like what I asked, pretending I didn't know? Like background noise?" I didn't answer. He leaned his head back, exhaled. "Claire, you deserve more." That was the first time someone had said those words to me without strings, without expectation. Not "you've always been reliable" or "you're so strong but you deserve more." Over the next few months, Ethan started naming the things I had forced myself not to see. How I was praised only for being practical. How my stories were cut short. How Lily's smallest effort was met with applause while my sacrifices went unspoken. "It's like you're running a relay with no baton," he said once. "You just keep moving forward, but no one's ever passed anything to you." He didn't know about the money yet. I couldn't bring myself to tell him. Partly because I was embarrassed, but mostly because I knew what he'd say, that this wasn't just generosity. It was erasure. And he would have been right. Still, I kept sending it. Month after month. My apartment stayed cold in the winter, my shoes developed holes, and my weekends became a rotation of freelance projects and side hustles. But I told myself it was fine, that I was being a good daughter, that this was what loyalty looked like. But loyalty without recognition eventually starts to feel like servitude. And though I didn't say it out loud yet, the question had already started forming in the back of my mind. How much more of myself would I have to give before anyone even noticed I was bleeding? The answer was coming. But first, it would take a birthday mine for everything to unravel. I never expected fireworks or a banner. I wasn't hoping for a party or a wrapped box with a ribbon. I just wanted someone to remember. That's all. As my 25th birthday approached, I did what I'd learned to do best: manage expectations. I dropped gentle reminders in group texts. I mentioned casually during dinner the week before that I had taken the day off work. I even left a voicemail for Mom the night before saying, "No big plans tomorrow, just hoping for a quiet day." I was trying to give them a chance, a space to choose me, to show up. The morning of my birthday came quietly. I made coffee in my chipped French press and sat by the window of my tiny apartment, watching the sky shift from gray to gold. No calls, no texts. I told myself people were just busy. By noon, I'd answered work emails out of habit, vacuumed the carpet, and reorganized my spice rack, anything to keep my hands full, anything to keep my mind from noticing the silence. It was around 4:00 p.m. when my phone finally lit up. It was Lily. Not to wish me happy birthday, not to ask if I had plans. She wanted to talk about the surprise party Mom and Dad were throwing for her. Her 22nd birthday was the following weekend, and they had gone all-out decorations, catering a custom cake, even a playlist curated just for her. She was calling to ask if I could help her design the invitations. She talked for 20 minutes. I barely said a word. I just listened, nodding, even though she couldn't see me. I smiled, even though my chest was slowly caving in. Toward the end of the call, I cleared my throat and said softly, "Hey, just so you know, today's actually my birthday." There was a long pause. Then came a light laugh, the kind people give when they're embarrassed, but don't want to dwell on it. "Oh, wow. I totally forgot. I've been so busy with all this party stuff. Happy birthday, Claire." She didn't ask how my day was going. Didn't ask if I wanted to be included in her celebration. She offered no apology, just a cheerful wish and a quick, "I've got to run," before the line went dead. I stared at my phone, then placed it face down on the kitchen table. The air in my apartment suddenly felt smaller, heavier, like it knew something I didn't want to admit. That I wasn't just overlooked. I had become completely invisible. When Ethan arrived later that evening with takeout from my favorite Thai place and a single white daisy in a mason jar, I didn't tell him what happened. Not right away. I just let him hold my hand as we ate on the couch, the sounds of the city humming outside the window. It wasn't until we'd finished our meal and he asked, "Did your family call that the dam cracked?" "They forgot," I whispered. He didn't respond right away. He didn't try to fix it or offer hollow comfort. He just moved closer, placed his hand on my back, and let me sit with the truth. That night as I lay in bed, I thought about all the birthdays I had remembered, the cakes I had helped bake for Lily, the gifts I had saved for months to buy, the parties I had helped clean up after while our parents gushed over her popularity and charm. I thought about the thousands of dollars I had sent home, the nights I had skipped dinner to keep the power on in a house I no longer lived in, the praise I had watched Lily receive for sacrifices she hadn't made. And then I thought about that phone call, how easily I was forgotten, how quickly the day meant for me became just another errand on someone else's list. It didn't matter how many zeros I transferred. It didn't matter how quietly I carried the family's burdens. If love was measured by visibility, I was bankrupt. The next morning, I increased the monthly transfer to $1,500. I don't know why. Maybe it was one last hope that the weight of my giving would eventually be felt, that something would finally shift. But deep down, I knew the truth. No one can see what they've trained themselves not to look for. And I was no longer sure I wanted to be someone they only remembered when they needed saving. There's a moment when fatigue stops being temporary, when it stops feeling like something you can fix with a nap or a long weekend. It seeps in quietly through the spaces where resentment festers and recognition never arrives. By the winter of my 26th year, that fatigue had taken root in every part of me. Dad's condition had worsened. The fall from the ladder had damaged more than just his back. It had fractured the foundation of their household. He was out of work for months. The surgery alone wiped out their savings, and workers' compensation barely covered a portion of what they needed. Medical bills stacked up. Therapy sessions, prescriptions, gas to and from appointments. I watched my parents slowly lose their grip on the life they had once held together with quiet pride. And I stepped in again. I increased the monthly transfer to $3,000. It was a number I didn't speak aloud to anyone, not even Ethan. I didn't want to say it, because saying it would make it real, and making it real would mean acknowledging the enormity of what I was giving away. To afford it, I stripped my life down to the studs. I moved out of my modest studio into a basement-level apartment in a far less desirable part of Raleigh. The new rent was $450 a month, but it came with mold, no natural light, and a radiator that worked only when it felt like it. I sold my car, started relying entirely on the city bus. I canceled every subscription, stopped going to the gym, declined every happy hour. I clipped coupons for discount groceries and bought clothes only when something had worn through. By spring, I was eating mostly rice and canned vegetables. My shoes had holes in the soles. My work wardrobe shrank to 2 pairs of pants and 3 blouses I rotated through the week. Still, the money went out like clockwork on the 15th of every month just before bills were due. At home, Lily thrived. She was still living rent-free in the house I was secretly funding, still ordering organic groceries, posting brunch photos with friends, and getting weekly manicures. Still painting, always painting, and talking about the art world like it owed her something. When Dad winced climbing the stairs, she'd rub his shoulder for a second, then return to adjusting the lighting on her canvas. She spoke about sacrifice as an idea. I was living it. And yet, at every family dinner, the narrative stayed the same. Lily just has this gift for knowing what we need, Mom would say, eyes damp with gratitude. She never complains. She just helps, Dad would add, giving her hand a proud squeeze. She has such a generous soul, Aunt Carol once told me at a family gathering. You're lucky to have a sister like her. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. Because no one screams when they know the room has already decided who deserves to be heard. Instead, I kept showing up, kept working, kept disappearing a little more with each month that passed. Ethan, to his credit, never stopped noticing. He saw the weight loss, the dark circles the nights I fell asleep during movies, and the mornings I woke up too early to finish freelance projects. He offered to help financially. I refused. Not out of pride, though there was some of that, but because I was ashamed. Ashamed that I was pouring myself out into a family that didn't even know they were drinking from me. You're not just tired, he said one night as I nodded off over takeout. You're drained. Completely. You're keeping them afloat while drowning quietly. I looked at him and wanted to say, I know. I wanted to say I'm scared, but what came out was, it's just a hard season. It'll pass. It didn't pass. I had been telling myself the same lie for years, that it was temporary, that eventually they'd see, that somehow this invisible sacrifice would grow into visible love. But the truth was, I was burning at both ends while Lily basked in the warmth, and no one had even noticed the smoke. Lily's 25th birthday was a full production, streamers, string lights, personalized cupcakes with edible gold dust, a guest list longer than our family reunion. Mom said she wanted it to be special, something to remind Lily how loved she is. And all I could think about was how 3 years earlier, my 25th birthday had passed unnoticed except for a call from Lily to ask me to help design her party invitations. Still, I showed up. I always did. The backyard had been transformed, white canopies stretched over long tables. Mason jars with floating candles lined every surface, and Lily's paintings hung like curated gallery pieces around the patio. I arrived with a small wrapped box and an envelope. The gift was modest, a discount store picture frame, and the only cash I had left that month, $48. It was everything I could afford after paying rent, utilities, and sending the usual $5,000 to my parents. That month had been especially tight. I'd skipped dinner 3 nights just to stay afloat. I told myself Lily wouldn't care, that she would understand the gesture, the thought behind it. I was wrong. The gift opening started late in the afternoon. The whole family gathered around the display table like it was Christmas morning. Lily opened designer handbags, luxury art supplies, a gift certificate to a weekend spa retreat. Each unwrapping was met with gasps and applause. Then she reached my box. She unwrapped it gently, smiled, said, "Thank you, Claire. This is really thoughtful." And for a moment I breathed. Then Dad picked up the envelope I'd taped to the side. He pulled out the cash, squinted, and said loud enough for everyone to hear, 60 cents. That's it. I froze. He held the envelope up, letting the bills flutter for effect. Your sister sends us $5,000 a month, and this is what you give her for her birthday. Laughter didn't come. Not right away. Just silence. Heavy. Sticky. 30 pairs of eyes turned to me, some wide with disbelief, others narrowing in confusion, maybe pity. I felt like I had stepped outside of myself, like I was watching a scene from a life I'd tried so hard to make invisible, now suddenly and brutally exposed. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice dry and cracked. "That money you've been receiving every month? It wasn't from Lily. It was from me." The silence that followed was suffocating. Dad blinked, frowning. "What are you talking about? I've been sending the money," I said again, firmer this time. "For 3 years, since your injury. I've been covering everything, bills, groceries, even some of the party costs. I just never put my name on it." Across the circle, I saw Lily's face go pale. Mom stepped forward, arms crossed. "Why would you lie like this? Why try to steal credit from your sister?" Her voice was sharp, cold, like I had just confessed to a crime instead of a sacrifice. "I'm not lying," I said. "I can show you bank records, transfers, dates, everything." Dad shook his head, laughing nervously. "Don't make this ugly, Claire. Don't ruin her birthday with whatever this is." I looked around. No one moved. No one said a word in my defense. Even Lily, standing in the center of it all, wearing a new dress, holding a box of gold-tipped brushes, said nothing. She didn't correct them. She didn't admit the truth. She just lowered her gaze and let the lie sit there like a crown on her head. That was the moment. Not the insult. Not the disbelief. The silence. It confirmed what I had known deep down, but refused to face that my family didn't just misunderstand me. They didn't see me at all. I set the remaining unopened gift back on the table, turned, and walked out of the party. Behind me, I heard Dad say something about drama. I heard laughter resume. I heard the celebration begin again, as if I had never been there in the first place. That night in my apartment, with no heat, no lights, except for a single desk lamp, I opened my banking app and canceled the automatic transfer. 3 years of silence, 3 years of sacrifice. And for the first time, I kept the money for myself. The relief was instant, terrifying, but also freeing. Because maybe walking away wasn't betrayal. Maybe it was finally telling the truth, not to them, but to myself. For the first 2 weeks after Lily's party, I heard nothing. No calls, no texts, no attempts to clarify or confront. Just silence so thick it felt like being buried under glass. I kept checking my phone, half expecting some version of an apology, or at least an acknowledgement. But there was nothing. At first I thought maybe they needed time. Time to process what had happened. Time to look at the bank records I'd offered to show them. Time to sit with the idea that the narrative they had clung to so tightly for years might not be true. But silence, I've learned, isn't always absence. Sometimes it's strategy. Sometimes silence says, "You embarrassed us. So now you don't exist." Meanwhile, I was breathing differently. Not better, not exactly, but freer. For the first time in 3 years, I had my full paycheck. I bought groceries without calculating every cent. I replaced the shoes I had duct taped twice. I let myself buy a small space heater to keep my freezing apartment livable. I even took Ethan out to dinner. Nothing fancy, just a meal where I didn't wince at the check. He noticed the change immediately. You seem lighter, he said, watching me stir honey into my tea. I shrugged. Maybe I'm just tired of pretending it doesn't hurt. He reached across the table, took my hand, and said what I hadn't dared to say out loud. You did the right thing. Even if they never admit it, you did the right thing. But even right things come with backlash. The first wave hit on a Tuesday evening. Voicemails started piling up, first from Mom, then Dad, then Lily, then Mom again. Claire, please call. There's something wrong with the account. We don't know what happened. We need to talk. I didn't answer. I wasn't ready. Then came the third message from Lily. Her voice was unusually quiet. Mom and Dad are freaking out. They thought the money would still come this month, and I didn't know what to say. I told them I didn't know anything. I'm sorry. I should have said something at the party, but you could have just told them the truth privately, Claire. It didn't have to go like that, didn't it? Because I had tried quietly, I had hinted, I had waited, I had hoped. The public moment wasn't born out of bitterness, it was born out of finally being pushed to a place where silence had turned into erasure. The next day, Dad called directly. No voicemail this time. When I picked up, his voice was different, tired, but also cautious. Claire, he said, we checked the bank records. It was you. I didn't say anything. I wanted to know what would follow, what shape the recognition would take. But instead of an apology, he sighed. I just don't understand why you didn't tell us sooner. Why keep it a secret? Why make a scene like that at Lily's birthday? I swallowed hard. Because you wouldn't have believed me if I'd told you quietly, I said. You didn't believe me even when I said it with witnesses. There was a long pause. Then came his real concern. Well, now we're in trouble. Your mom's trying to pick up more tutoring hours, but we're already behind on the mortgage. If this was about feeling unappreciated, can't we talk about that and move forward? But we need that money, Claire. And there it was. Not thank you, not we're sorry, not we didn't realize what we were asking of you. Just we need you to go back to sacrificing. I listened, I nodded, I didn't argue. But when he asked gently, almost like a favor, if I could restart the transfers just until we get back on our feet, I said something I never thought I'd hear come out of my own mouth. No. He didn't yell. He didn't beg. He just said, okay, and hung up. But I could feel it through the silence, through the fragile quiet that followed, that something had shifted. I had refused, and the earth miraculously hadn't swallowed me whole. Ethan hugged me that night like someone who understood the weight of an entire identity unraveling and reforming all at once. You didn't just say no to your dad, he whispered. You said yes to yourself. It didn't feel like triumph. It felt like grief. The grief of letting go of who I thought I had to be to earn love. The grief of realizing that maybe they would never choose me the way I had spent years choosing them. But also in that grief there was clarity. The silence from my family wasn't emptiness. It was space. And I had finally stepped into it for me. In the weeks that followed my no, the quiet broke, but not in the way I hoped. It didn't come in the form of understanding, or accountability, or even a late apology wrapped in discomfort. No. What came was something far more familiar, far more practiced. Pressure. It started with Mom. She called, her voice already trembling before I answered. Claire, we're going to lose the house. Your dad's in pain. I'm working evenings and weekends now. Lily's trying her best, but she's not in a position to cover everything. Please, I know you're upset, but this isn't the time to make a point. Not the time to make a point. As if 3 years of silent sacrifice, of giving until I had nothing left, had been nothing more than some petty grudge. As if the humiliation at Lily's party hadn't been a breaking point, but a tantrum. I didn't yell. I didn't defend. I just said calmly, I'm not doing this anymore without respect, without acknowledgement, and without change. She cried, told me I was cold, said I'd become someone she didn't recognize. And maybe she was right. Maybe she didn't recognize me, because for the first time in my life, I wasn't folding. Then came Lily, a long, carefully worded message full of flowery guilt. Family is supposed to support each other without keeping score, Claire. It's not about who gave more, it's about doing what's needed when it matters most. I never asked to be the favorite. You could have said something sooner. What she didn't say, but what echoed behind every word, was clear. You're making this uncomfortable. You're ruining the illusion we all relied on. I didn't reply. And that silence became its own offense. So they escalated. Calls from aunts, uncles, cousins I hadn't heard from in years. Suddenly, everyone had something to say. Claire, your mom says she can't sleep at night. Is that really what you want? You've always been the strong one. Why are you acting like this now? Don't let pride come between you and your family. And the most painful one, the one that nearly cracked me, came from my grandmother. 83 years old, kind-eyed, and once the only person in the family who'd made me feel truly seen. She called, her voice soft and weary. Sweetheart, I raised you better than this. Your parents need you. Why would you let them struggle like this when you can help? That's not who you are. I closed my eyes. Because she was right. That was who I'd always been. The helper, the bridge, the quiet one who filled in the gaps without asking for credit, the one who made sacrifices feel seamless. But that girl was exhausted, and what no one wanted to admit was that they didn't miss me. They missed the version of me who kept them comfortable. I tried to explain it to her, told her about the bank transfers, the rent I couldn't afford, the nights I skipped meals while my sister was praised for money she never gave. But she didn't want to hear it. I don't care about who gave what, she said. I care about love. And love means doing what needs to be done even when it's hard. I hung up the phone with hands shaking, not because I was angry, but because I felt the old version of me trying to claw her way back in. The girl who would have apologized, the girl who would have picked up the burden again just to make the room feel warm. But Ethan found me that night curled on the couch, tear-stained and silent, and he reminded me of something simple and undeniable. You're not asking for applause, he said. You're asking to matter. And in a family where love was always conditional on silence, mattering felt like rebellion. So I stayed quiet. I let the pressure come. I let them label me selfish, cold, ungrateful. Because sometimes protecting your peace means accepting that people will tell your story wrong. And sometimes being the villain in their version is the price of being the hero in your own. 3 months. That's how long it took for the silence to turn into struggle, real, tangible, unavoidable. Without the money I'd been sending, the scaffolding of their lives started to show cracks. My father's part-time hours at the construction site weren't enough to cover the mortgage. My mother took on every tutoring student she could find, her once tidy evenings now filled with flashcards and lesson plans spread across the dining room table. Their smiles, once performative, started to slip. And Lily, my sister, their golden girl, faced something she'd never known before: consequence. With no one left to silently bankroll her studio lifestyle, she was forced into a world she had long ignored. She applied for jobs reluctantly at first. Gallery assistant, art teacher, graphic designer, anything with a paycheck. Eventually, she landed a full-time position at a local design firm, $35,000 a year, a cubicle with fluorescent lighting, and a boss who didn't care about her artistic temperament. For the first time, she had to be somewhere by 9 a.m. For the first time, she had to earn what she consumed. And more importantly, for the first time, she had to contribute $800 a month. That was her new household share. I didn't hear this from her directly. I heard it from a cousin at a family barbecue I didn't attend, who whispered it to me later like a piece of gossip that was finally safe to share. Lily was overwhelmed, tired, unprepared. She'd been crying in the break room. She was learning what it meant to carry weight with no one to catch you. And while I didn't wish that pain on her, I couldn't deny the quiet vindication that came with it. This was what I'd known all along, that responsibility, when unshared, becomes suffocation. And I had suffocated for years so Lily could breathe easy. Now she knew what the air felt like when no one else was holding it for her. But the real shift, the one I'd been waiting for, came on a rainy Wednesday evening, when my mom called with a different tone in her voice. "Claire," she said softly, "we'd like you to come for dinner this Sunday. Just dinner. No expectations. Just a conversation." There was something in the way she said it. Hesitation. Weariness. Maybe even humility. I told her I'd think about it. And I did. Not out of pettiness, but because I had finally learned that my presence was something to be considered, not assumed. That Sunday I walked into the house that still smelled like old carpet and cinnamon candles, and everything felt smaller. The corners dimmer. The tension quieter. Dinner was simple. Pasta, garlic bread, no decorations, no celebrations, just food. We ate mostly in silence. Lily looked tired, and not in the performative way she used to when she stayed up painting. This was real fatigue, the kind that settles in your spine and makes you question the myth of effortlessness. After the plates were cleared, Dad pushed back his chair and looked at me in a way he hadn't in years. Not as a daughter he expected to fix everything, but as a person he might have misjudged. "We owe you an apology," he said. I didn't move. "We were wrong about the money," he continued. "Wrong about the party. And wrong about how we've treated you." My mother nodded, her eyes glassy. "We've always been proud of you, Claire," she said. "But we made the mistake of thinking you didn't need it," said out loud. "That you didn't need the attention. We assumed strength meant you didn't need anything." I felt my throat tighten, because for years that had been my internal monologue. "You're strong. You don't need this. You'll be fine." And I had been fine, until I wasn't. Then came the moment I didn't expect. Lily spoke. I knew, she said quietly. I knew the money wasn't from me. I should have said something. I was scared that if I gave up the credit I'd lose the only thing I was good at being. She looked up at me, and this time I saw something different. Not envy, not performance. Accountability. "I'm sorry," she said. "It wasn't perfect. It wasn't everything. But it was honest. And that was enough to begin." 2 weeks after that dinner I resumed the payments. Not because they asked, and certainly not because they expected it, but because this time I chose it, not out of guilt, not out of silence, but out of clarity. The difference was everything. I sat down with my parents and set the new terms. I would contribute $2,000 per month, an amount that still offered meaningful support, but one I could manage without sacrificing my health, my relationship, or my dignity. I made it clear this wasn't a return to the old pattern. This was a bridge, not a crutch. They listened, really listened. No interruptions, no assumptions, just acknowledgement. For the first time, the money I gave wasn't invisible. It wasn't misattributed. It wasn't absorbed into a narrative that erased me. They thanked me. Out loud. In full. They told me how it would be used, invited me into financial decisions, and checked in to ask how I was doing, not just financially, but emotionally. And perhaps most surprising of all, Lily didn't retreat. She didn't collapse under the weight of accountability. She stepped up. She stayed at her job, continued contributing her share, and even began offering to cover groceries or utilities when she had extra. She asked for my help reviewing her new budget. And for the first time in our lives, we weren't sister and shadow, we were equals. The dynamic that had once been quietly cruel had shifted into something sustainable, mutual, adult. It took time. Some days still felt tentative, like we were all testing the weight of this new foundation. But the difference was visible. They saw me now, not as the fixer, not as the fallback, as a daughter, as a woman, as someone who mattered. And in that recognition, I found space to breathe. I moved into a better apartment, small but full of light. I started saving again. I took weekends off. I laughed more. I lived more. And Ethan, who had stood beside me through every quiet unraveling, was still there, reminding me every day that love should never require erasure. Eventually, my dad returned to full-time work. My mom scaled back her hours. Lily got a raise. And when I finally told them I'd be reducing my contributions over the next few months, they didn't flinch. They nodded and said, "You've done more than enough." Because finally they believed it. And so did I. For years, I thought love meant disappearing to keep everyone else afloat. But the truth is, love that erases you isn't love at all. It's expectation masquerading as virtue. What I've learned is simple, but everything. Your worth is not measured by what you give up for others. It's defined by how honestly you stand in your own space and how bravely you ask to be seen in it. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt invisible in your own family or struggled to reclaim your place, leave a comment below. I'd love to hear how you found your way back to yourself. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more true stories about healing identity and the quiet power of standing your ground. You are not alone, and you deserve to be seen.